All right, Nick, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, with the recent addition of Aaron Banks to this Green Bay offensive line, the picture, the idea, the thought going forward is what is the new, scheme? What is the new lineup of this offensive line going to look like? Who's going to slot into where? And there's a latest report out of Green Bay of what it's going to look like, especially at the interior of the offensive line. And I think it has the makings of something really, really special. There's some really good news on the horizon. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, some really interesting, some really good news, I think, for the Green Bay faithful going forward. Then they have a very strong plan for this offensive line going forward. Let's jump into the article, and then we'll break down some stats after that on the other side. This, of course, from SI.com, and says, Brian Gutekunst made official that Elton Jenkins who was a Pro Bowler in 2021 and 2022, would be moving to center to accommodate the big money addition of Banks. Jenkins was the starting center during his final 2 seasons at Mississippi State in 2017 and 2018. With the Packers, he's also played 297 snaps of center in 2020, and he had 72 snaps at center last season. They said, "We feel he has a chance to be an all-pro center," Gutekunst said. "We've talked about it a lot, how versatility plays into our offensive line, and having guys that can move different spots, and Elton's one of those guys. He can play all 5 spots. So he's a luxury. I'm excited to see what he can do at center as well." And I think the key here, Gutekunst saying they think he can be an all-pro at center. I think that is very, very important here because I also think he can be an all-pro at center. He's been a Pro Bowler at guard. He's been doing really good things twice, actually, but I think his attributes, he was way better as a center in college. Let's bring up his stats from his final season in college, comparing it to his season last year at the guard position. And there's a little bit, a very minuscule amount, but there's some center mixed into last season as well. But if we just look overall what he was able to do in college with his last season of being a center, he did some really, really good stuff. Overall, as a guard this past season, 66 overall grade for him. As a center in college, that overall season, he had a 77.2 PFF grade. Pretty big jump there, over 10 points in jump. You look at what he was able to do as far as the run blocking scheme he was able to perform last year, a 61.2 run blocking grade to compare to a 72.8 run blocking grade in college at that center position. And finally, we look at where Jenkins has been at his best. That was the pass blocking department. Last year in the pass blocking department, Jenkins did really, really good. 83.1. Could he possibly even do any better at center? Well, yes, he could. He had an 87.4 pass blocking grade there. He's been better in every single aspect when he was playing in center. He actually played guard in college's first 2 years as well as tackle. So there has been, there's data as well as what he's done there. But center was his best position. That's where he did his best work. And I think him slotting over to the center position now for the Green Bay Packers, it's just going to make him even better. He was a Pro Bowler as a guard. We saw what he did. He brought to the table a lot of really good stuff. I think going back to the natural position of center for him, where he played his best ball in college, I think he's going to play his best ball in the NFL as well. And I think Gutekunst's comments are not very far off. I think this guy could be an all-pro at center. I think he brings a lot to here, and I think with the additions, this Green Bay offensive line, especially in the middle, is going to be a very, very strong factor going forward. Curious what your thoughts on this one, Nick, but before we get to you, Green Bay fans, in the comment section below, what do you think about the move to center for Jenkins? Is this something you've been looking at for a while here? You said this is the perfect addition. This is what we needed. Is it an A-plus home run out of the park idea? Is it a C? You're not sold. You really don't know what he's going to do. You want to see some more data, maybe see how it plays out during the season, or is it an F? You think he'd be used better elsewhere? As they said, he's a 5-position type of player for this Green Bay team. He's done it all. Let us know, though, your thoughts on specifically the move to center in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about this latest out of Green Bay?
So it's important to understand, and this is the way it works in the NFL, the way it works in the business world, just length in general, right? It's when you're trying to add anything, buy a company, anytime you're trying to acquire something, right? It's not just the addition of that, it's what of that entity that you acquire, in this case, a player, banks, right? It's what it does for your team as a whole. In this case, it's about unleashing Jenkins. And I think this is very important. This is one, if you go back to the 1990s Bulls, right? Of course, one of the things that they did that really made them a dynasty was the addition of Dennis Rodman. Was Rodman such a great basketball player? Was he so much more better than Pippen or Jordan or so much more important? Absolutely not. But bringing Rodman in the fold allowed Jordan to do more Jordan things and allowed Pippen to do more Pippen things. And the result, of course, was the 6 titles in 8 years, the greatest run in NBA history, in my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And this is something that's very common in the business world as well. You look at Google, parent company Alphabet, for those of you who follow this kind of thing, recently bought a cybersecurity firm, a startup, for $32 billion a few weeks ago. They overpaid on like valuation metrics by like a bonkers amount. Why would Google do this? Why would they overpay by so much to acquire this startup? It's because they were tired of having their own engineers, their best and brightest, focused on cybersecurity and internet protocol protections and things like that, of trying to detect and avoid threats and reduce threats and mitigate that kind of things in cyber attacks. They were taking their best engineers that they were trying to develop new products and maintain their systems going on at Google, and instead of doing them towards those things, right, they had to put them in other areas. That's what the Packers were doing here. At least it's what they believe they were doing. Jenkins is an all-pro center according to Gutekunst, right? But they haven't been able to put him at center because of other deficiencies. You slide in Banks, suddenly Jenkins can go to center, suddenly he becomes a better player, and Jenkins is a good enough guard that you're able to improve overall as an offensive line. You go back to the Google example, they overpay for Wiz. Wiz can now handle the cybersecurity. Google can take their best and brightest engineers and throw them on their hardest problems in terms of products and services. And as a whole, Google is better. On paper, in terms of the headline, they overpaid, but they're going to get a lot more value out of that acquisition because it unleashes the talent they already have. That's what the Packers have done here. They already have Jenkins, who's an all pro at the center position, but he has to spend his time at guard, right? And that's just is a waste of his value. You bring in Banks and overpay a little bit, even though they really didn't overpay. And we broke it down a few videos ago. It actually was a very team friendly deal. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that they overpaid. You bring in Banks, you get rid of Myers at the center position. So you're automatically better there in terms of the combination of Jenkins, Myers, and now the combination of Banks, Jenkins is better according to PFF. We're talking double digits better. So on paper, they just got better by default. But also now Jenkins is just going to become a better player anyway. So it's not just a 10-point better player. Now you've got Jenkins. It's going to go from his grade, that say 65 or 66 or whatever it was, and he's going to go to 75 or something like that. Banks is going to slide it into a fine job. And just like that, overnight, you've got one player who's 20 points better, and you've got another player in Banks who's coming in to basically take over a position that was becoming sort of a weakness because Jenkins was playing out of his depth, right? This is what happens. This is what happens all the time, especially with the offensive line. People try and patchwork it together. They try and figure it out as best they can, and they get a decent group out there, but not everyone is playing to their strengths. That's what happened with Green Bay. It's why their grades in terms of overall pass blocking really struggled last season, according to PFF. They're going to be a lot better just because they're now putting people in positions to be successful. It sounds so simple. It sounds so easy, but it's one of those things where in anything, whether it's your day-to-day job or the National Football League, if you put your players, if you put the people in the positions that they're the best at, generally good things happened. I think last year the Packers weren't following that in terms of their interior offensive line. And listening to Gutenkunst's comments and looking at the moves they made this offseason, obviously the Banks deal and now sliding Jenkins over, it's clear they're taking that new approach, and it's a really, really good strategy.
Yeah, Nick, and there's a couple other aspects I think that really brings to the table. When Jenkins was playing center, he really, I think he was more comfortable, and I think he did some things a little bit better or did less of certain things. And that particularly is looking at the penalty department, because that's where one thing he's been kind of a boon for the Packers in the past is when he played center in college, he dropped a career average of about like 4 to 3 penalties a season. He only had one penalty a season when he was playing center. Look at the Packers last few years, been high on the penalties again. 10 penalties for Jenkins last year. I think moving him over to center help eliminate some of that. Obviously, I think adding the addition of a guy like Banks is going to help him out a lot as well. But just overall, I think that's going to be good. And I think one other thing is important is I don't really think he's gotten his true potential as a run blocker, playing guard or switching around a lot. I think he can kind of, shore that up because in college, when he switched over to center, his run blocking grade jumped up about 5 to 10 points each season that he was playing center. So I think that's one thing we can look at as well. Not really a certainty there, but I think those are two things that could be correlated with him switching over to center and why we think that he's going to be such a strong addition to his team. And I think the point you bring up about Banks, really the Banks signing, as much as, and we broke it down, not a really huge salary, boon on the Packers. I think it was actually not that bad of a deal for them to get Banks. But that deal was more than just money. It was more than just the play that he brought to the field. I love the point you bring up. It gives them the ability to now move Jenkins to the position they think he is the most valuable about. It gives them flexibility. It allows the Packers to play their best players. And by getting a solid guy at the guard position, I really think this team is turning things around. I think something really special is about to happen this season. Jordan Love, finally, he's going to have that, great wall of China in front of him. No one's getting past it. They're going to be elite blockers up front. I think Zach Tom's done phenomenal as well. I think, getting Rasheed Walker at tackle, if they stick with him or not, who's to say? But I think that's something else. And Jordan Morgan coming up. This team is looking a lot better at offensive line. They've been struggling going back and forth the last couple of years, especially with David Bakhtiari being in the fold and whether he was going to be there, whether he was going to be injured, whether he's going to retire. That took a toll. This offensive line is finally shaping up. I think we're going to see the best Green Bay offensive line we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, and just to hit it home with a few numbers here, if you look at the combination of Jenkins at left guard and Myers at center, just adding them together, they had 120 points roughly total, 120, 120 of PFF overall grade. Now the addition of Banks left guard, Jenkins at center. So now the combination of those two is 130 points better on paper immediately. So you're an upgrade, 10 points. That's big. That's a big upgrade right there. But moving Jenkins to center, what Gutekunst is arguing and what your data backs up is Jenkins himself is also going to get an extra 10 to 15 point boost. So again, in one move, one deal, they're going to end up being between the left guard and the center position combined 20 to 25 points better overall. That is a massive leap. And that's what's so important about these kind of deals. It's not just the player you're bringing in, the acquisition, the value that specific entity is bringing just by himself. It's everything together. It's the collective. You hear this accretion. How is this going to be accretive to the future propositions of this team? And this is how it will be. Banks will come in, quality left guard on a team-friendly deal like we broke down, and it unleashes Jenkins. This is smart roster building, right? It's not about just bringing in a collection of talent, right? It's not bringing all the big names. It's not making all the headlines. It's bringing in guys that make your team better while also unleashing the guys you already have. This is what the Packers do very good, right? They have these kind of moves year in and year out, and it's just another really solid example of it.